I'm meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update for this April 15th, 2023. It's being brought to you by WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. Also being brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors. Well, over the last week, a lot of you enjoyed a huge warm-up after unseasonably cold and record cold in the first week of April. The second week of April, about the opposite. Record heat in some areas, a lot of melting snow, and some flooding. However, I call April the cruelest month of the year because you can really have these wild swings in temperatures and conditions, and that's what we're going to see. Colder and unsettled weather is going to return after this recent warm-up. We're going to see the roller coaster up and down that you expect this time of year with temperature patterns. So there will be cold periods followed by warm periods, but more cold periods are still to come. We're not done yet with the opportunity for winter weather, especially in the northern plains and west, despite the fact that many of you reach the 80s and 90s. A lot of the central and western United States is going to be 30 to 40 degrees colder. And yes, the possibility in the coming days for more snow falling is possible, despite the fact that we've had summer-like weather here recently. Now, over the last week, we have not seen a lot of precipitation other than the Pacific Northwest and the far Northwest Rockies. The rest of the northern plains, most of the Rockies, into the Plain States, really not seeing much in the way of any significant precipitation over the last 7 days with that warmer trend and that high pressure trend that moved on in. And here you are. Over the last week, look how warm it's been relative to average right here. Some very warm temperatures, but also some snow-covered areas still, keeping those temperatures down in southern Canada and across parts of the Dakotas and parts of the Rockies here. Those cool temperatures still due to a lot of snow cover still existing. But certainly this past week has melted a lot of ice and snow in many areas, and that will continue, but not at the steady, accelerated pace due to cooler weather. The drought monitor doesn't look very different. We continue to have this north-south axis of severe drought conditions across the southern plains up into Nebraska. And this area here continues to be a concern headed here into spring and into early summer. While the rest of the western United States, drought conditions compared to where they were a year ago continue to show very big improvements. Now, this is the forecast coming on up. For this upcoming weekend, we have low pressure headed to the Corn Belt, Great Lakes, and it's going to head up into New England, bringing rain and snow and thunderstorm activity. But high pressure will be developing in the western states, leading to some warmer temperatures and improving weather by Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday here. Colder, wet weather in this part of the country during that same time frame. Notice up here in the Gulf of Alaska and across the west coast of British Columbia, just a very large pocket of cold, moist air that is sitting there, but it's going to start to make a move into the central and western United States and the northern plains by the middle to the end of next week. So after this big warm-up, we're going to have a brief cool down, then we're going to have a brief warm-up, then much colder weather comes in mid to late next week. Mid to late next week, we will likely see temperatures go far below average, with areas of rain and snow coming on in, and there you can see it. That system leaves the Gulf of Alaska and pushes into the central and northern Rockies and northern Plains states. This will push in cold, wet weather to the west again, thunderstorms in the Plain states with warmer temperatures there, but colder weather and stormy weather out west. So livestock interests, especially folks who are still in calving and lambing operations, you'll need to watch the weather mid to late next week in the northern plains and parts of the Rockies for potentially another storm brewing. If it's not one storm, it may be a couple, but it's going to bring cold, wet weather nonetheless that could be stressful to young and weak livestock mid to late next week from the Dakotas and Nebraska west through the Rockies and into the Pacific Northwest and into the Great Basin states. You'll need to keep an eye on the weather then. Precipitation-wise, you can see that there's precipitation coming over the next 7 to 10 days with that Pacific storm, and there's the snowfall forecast. That's correct. I know it seems hard to believe after the week we just went through on how warm it's been, but the opportunity for late spring snows is certainly still on the table. Have yourself a great week ahead. See you next week.